Let's speak to Chloe Smith. She is the Economic Secretary to the Treasury, and she joins me now from Westminster. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. The government now has higher borrowing than in the plans that you inherited from Labour at the general election. Can you possibly say that the recovery is on track?
The recovery is on track, and much of the independent data and analysis from the Office of Budgetary Responsibility underlines that we are having to take unexpected measures, but that we will take them and we will be on course.
You will be on course, even though you're going to have to extend the austerity programme by 2 years, even though growth has been slashed, and even though you're actually going to have higher borrowing costs, a higher amount of borrowing than the Labour government would have had at this stage. How can that possibly be on track?
Well, the fact is you have to deal with what faces you, and what this budget, what the Office of Budgetary Responsibility set out is that there are a number of causes of why we're in this situation. Firstly, the external pressures of inflation. Secondly, the Eurozone crisis. And thirdly, the ongoing and permanent damage caused by the financial crisis of a couple of years ago. So those things together mean we have to be taking the action we're doing. I'm afraid the answer, as perhaps the other side would like it, is not to borrow more. You can't solve a borrowing problem by borrowing more. You need to keep a steady track, which is what we're doing, and we are on course to reduce and tackle both the deficit and the debt.
You talk about all these things that you weren't expecting to happen, these external pressures, as you call them, of inflation, of the Eurozone crisis. All these things have changed since you came to power. Is it not possible that your austerity plans ought to change as well?
No, and you only need to look at the outside commentary on this. You need to look at the markets responding to this. You need to look at what the IMF has said, and the OECD and others that say that Plan A, as it were, the sustainable and firm plans that the Chancellor has set out consistently since we came to office, are working. There is no chance of coming off those. We need to stick with them, because actually these external factors, they're very real for people. They mean the cost of living, they mean jobs, they mean all these things that
just let's talk a little bit about jobs, because the Office of Budget Responsibility now predicts that 710,000 public sector jobs will go, rather than the previous 400,000 that was predicted. Surely with growth this low, you can't possibly think that those are going to be sucked up into the private sector, as was predicted before.
Well, actually, the OBR's figures do exactly that. I'm afraid they predict 1 million jobs growth in the private sector, which then stands alongside the figure you quoted for the public sector. So the OBR's figures and analysis point to very important things, and point to this government needing to keep on track, because to fail to do so would mean an international knock to our credibility, and that puts us in the position of other countries that you only need to turn on the TV to see: Italy, Greece, and even, dare we say it, the kind of ratings
exactly.
that America
just
is
a
having.
Quick last question on that. With the amount of borrowing that the government now needs to do, a lot more than you thought you were going to do, how convinced are you that the markets will keep faith with you? Because if they don't, and if your interest rates go up and you have to pay back more, that would really be an economic disaster, wouldn't it?
Higher interest rates would indeed be hard for households. So that's something we need to work on very carefully indeed. We need to keep this ship steady. We need to make sure that Britain stays the safe haven that the markets now recognise us as being, and that is this government's job, and that is what the Chancellor set out this afternoon in this autumn statement.
Chloe Smith, the Economic Secretary to the Treasury, thank you very much indeed for joining me.